Alright, so we want to know how we're going to hook our Arduino, which is the brains of our robot, up to our gearbox, which is the brawn of our robot. And we're going to do that by using this motor controller right here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is actually hook the motor up to our motor controller. So one motor hooks up between these two pins, one between these two pins. If you get it wrong, it doesn't really matter. You can, when you're coding it, just tell it the pins are hooked up backwards. It's an easy fix. All right? But if you want it to be the same as everybody else's, or say you have like a friend and you're both sharing code, you may end up physically wanting to switch a couple of those wires just so you get the same thing. All right? So when you hook up those up to your gearbox, it should look like that. Okay, so we see we got two wires going from one side to this motor to going to this motor. Okay, we need to power this. You'll notice here that it says plus 12 volts, ground, and plus 5 volts. Okay, the ground and the plus 12 volts are going to be hooked up directly to as much battery power as your motors can handle. So that's what's going to power your motor. Whatever is between here, that's what's going to go to your motor. But you also need to power this thing itself. It can power itself if you leave on the jumper here. This one's been removed. It comes with a jumper. I'd actually suggest you remove that because we only want the motor shield to draw power when your Arduino is actually on. We're going to power this off the Arduino. So I would remove that jumper, and you're going to run a wire from your Arduino, one of the 5-volt areas here. Okay, the ones that are labeled 5 volt. You're going to run a wire from that. You might want to solder it on to this plus 5 volts. Then, when your Uno is all powered up, it's going to power up that motor shield. Okay. So how does your motor shield work? Well, it's got 4 input pins here. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Basically, the way it works, one of them turns your left motor on forward. Next one turns your left motor on backwards. Right motor forwards, right motor backwards. Or something to that effect. Okay, I can't even remember offhand which is which. Okay, but we're going to hook up each of these 4 pins up to any digital pins on the Uno. I would suggest you probably want to hook it up to the pins that have pulse width modulation so you can run your motors at like partial power if you want. You know that a pin has pulse width modulation if it has like a little tilde, a little squiggle before the number on the pins here. Okay? And again, if you have a friend that you're sharing code with, you might want to pick the same numbers. And we might even decide as a group to pick some numbers. But it doesn't really matter. You can always change those later. And then what happens is when you do well, say you want to turn your motors all the way on or all the way off, you just do a digital write high command with the Uno programming suite. We'll turn that pin on. We'll say make this motor go forward. But if you turn this other pin on, it'll make it go backward. Okay? Say you want your robot to run forward. You're going to make both your left and right wheel both go forward. So maybe you turn on this pin and that pin. Okay? If you do want to get a little bit more finesse and want to have fine control over your robot, you'll use an analog write command to turn things on maybe part way. But that's for a problem for down the road. So right now we just want to know about hooking it up. So you're going to need to splice some wires together like the ground of your batteries. You're going to want several wires coming out of there because you're going to have to run one to ground on your Uno to actually power the ground of your Uno, and one to V in on your Uno. Okay, but also that red wire from your battery pack, you're going to want to be going to the plus 12 volt on your motor controller, and then everything should work. So that's what we're going to do.